Hi everyone. So I'm from our marketing department. I've come to talk to a room of 200 deeply technical people just before lunch. What could possibly go wrong? I'll give you a little background first of all as to who we are. Hopefully some of you know us as Imtech, or Imtech ICT to be precise. We were sold off by our parent company in October to a French company called Vinci, and we're just being rebranded as Axians, so we have this temporary logo at the bottom there. As I mentioned, I work primarily in our marketing, vendor and strategy department, so it isn't a technical presentation. I do apologise for that. I know it's a very technical meeting, but I also promise not to mention a single product either, so please keep me true to that. Throw something at me if I do. My background is actually in pre-sales, and before that in support, and that will hopefully come clear as we go through some of this. But really what I'm looking at now is NFV and SDN. Quite a focus on NFV because I think that's the first thing that we're seeing customers coming and asking us about and when they would deploy. The aim of this is, truths I put up there is perhaps incorrect, is really more just to go through some of the things that I'm hearing when I go and speak to customers. What are their worries? What do they think will happen? What do they think won't happen? And just give you our view on what I think about that. It is meant to be a bit controversial. It is meant to stimulate some discussion, so please do throw stuff back at me. We only learn when we hear from you guys and we understand your worries and concerns. So the first thing that I hear all the time is actually probably the most controversial, which is that software is cheaper, or that I should say that a virtual something is cheaper than a physical something. I don't see that personally now. Maybe you guys have got some better relationships with some of your vendors, but that's not what I see. And you know, the honest answer there is that I see a lot of vendors who are very worried about a physical revenue stream going away, yeah? And they need something to replace that. So for their point of view, if they're going to have a new annuity stream coming in, I think they're looking at software licenses. So if we're doing these comparisons with people, you need to look a bit broader than, say, a virtual firewall versus a physical firewall. You've got to look at why you're doing it and all the different components in that, such as the operations, the process, the automation side. And I guess one of my questions to you guys would be, is that something that you guys get into? If you're doing the engineering piece, are you actually just looking at a physical to a virtual firewall? Are you also looking at the pricing and the sort of cost side to your business of doing the automation and the process piece? Because I think if you're not, or if you're not involved in that, then maybe these arguments at the moment, especially in NFV, don't stack up. I apologise for putting up a vendor logo here, especially as I obviously heard earlier on there's a few disagreements. My point of this slide really is to say that if I go to some of the SDN congresses, I went to one in Düsseldorf a couple of months ago, with a few big telecoms standing up there saying it must be open source. Everything must be open source. I expect all of my vendors to write into OpenStack for free and put it into the main distribution of OpenStack. Well, again, being a bit blunt, they're called vendors for a reason. They're trying to sell you something, yeah? So you've got to be a bit realistic about that. And also, I think, just as we're having to change, you guys are probably going to have to as well. Are we a Google? Do I want to have 20 software developers? Can I afford to take those sort of people on now and start developing OpenStack? The answer for me is no. Maybe for you guys it's different. Maybe some of you will take that on. And the other answer, of course, I hear, and this could easily be a logo that starts with a V, is that you should just go with our solution. It's already there. It's automated. You know you're going to get to market quicker. We sit somewhere in the middle. You may sit at either end of that. But I think the key for me about this is vendors and vendor lock-in. Again, one thing I hear all the time is this is going to free us from vendor lock-in. We're going to be able to put whatever vendor we want in wherever we want. Actually, a question back to me for you guys is vendor lock-in really that bad? No. Yeah. Knew you'd have something to say now. I don't think it is. Do you know, when I wrote this, I thought maybe it is, maybe I see what you guys are saying, and in some ways I do, but when I think back to my first days, I was a CCNA many, many years ago. You start off learning a vendor, right? You start off learning and getting involved in an ecosystem. I think the piece for me, and if I look specifically at NFV, is what I'm trying to do is build a platform that I can put any vendor solutions into, if I so wish to do so, if I'm selling firewalls to an enterprise and they want 4 different types. So I need to have a platform that supports those different types of solutions. But does that platform underneath have to be open source? Does it have to be open to everything? Or can that bit be closed? So I think it's more about where do you need that vendor lock-in? Where does it work for you? Or do you need to be open? As I said, this big telco that I spoke to were absolutely adamant that they would have no vendor lock-in, that everything would be open source. Well, that doesn't make them very attractive to anyone, you know, to work with them, but may work for them. On the open source side, I mean, you've got to give it to this man. He writes headlines, doesn't he? I think he said this week something like, I don't like you, or I'm not a very nice man, and I don't care what you think of me. Fair enough. One of the things I hear all the time, or I used to when I was in pre-sales, I'd go around and say, okay, you're looking for feature X, or you want bandwidth Y, or an upgrade through this. Well, you've got to take these cards out of the chassis and put some new ones in, right? And eyes roll and dollar signs roll. And one thing I discovered quite recently, and this is my ignorance now, not being so technical, is that we bought some Intel servers we were using to do some of this in the lab, and then one of the techies said to me, oh, I need some new servers. Why is that? Because these ones don't support DPDK, and if I want the throughput. And I suddenly went, isn't that just as when I'm selling you a box and now I need to come and ship some cards out? And no one seems to have mentioned that piece to me. That may not be an issue for you guys. You may look and say, well, actually in 3 years' time, I'm going to be running a stack of servers. I can easily just take one out of service, replace it. It is, in theory, easier. Although I was trying to model in my head about doing that if you're, say, doing a virtual PE, whether you would find that as robust as doing that on a physical PE today. So is full vendor lock-in right? Is full open source right? Up to you guys which way you go down. Certainly some of the bigger telecoms are putting more into open source and developing that. Have you got the skills on board to do that? Do you want to go and recruit the skills to do that? We're having to change who we recruit and what skills they have. So this slide, I think for me, is trying to say, whereabouts on the scale do you want to be, or where do you need to be? You know, we were looking at CRM some time ago. I could go to Salesforce, just pay a monthly fee. I'm done. I'm on the far left of that. Or perhaps I could sit and write my own CRM, which would actually work much better for me, but would take me a lot longer to get to market and out there. It's a choice for you guys. It's a choice for you in terms of where you want your skill set to be, I think. This is a slide I've also changed my mind on. My answer to this was emphatically no. The aim for me of coming and talking to you about things like NFV is not to do the same with less people, but is to do more with the people that you have. You know, if I can automate a process, maybe I'm too nice a guy. I don't want to put people out of work to do the same level. I want to offer a way for you guys to be selling more, automating more, doing more. Then I thought about a guy who I used to manage who was working on some legacy server technology and didn't want to move off of that. I couldn't convince him to move to a different technology. I couldn't convince him to make that change. He did eventually do that, but if he isn't willing to make that change, then he's going to struggle a bit. And we're definitely seeing this inside of our organization. We have some people who today really get this and want to move down that path. Some people, of course, who've had the experience, even just simple things like, you know, loading up Linux, that some people haven't had, and others who are resolutely staying out of it. We're not planning mass redundancies, I should point that out, but we are planning a change in what people do. Yeah, and it's also easy, isn't it? I've had several vendors come and obviously give the pitch to us, as they do to you guys. It really isn't, and especially in NFV world, there's lots of missing parts that I see today in terms of what needs to be there to actually make it production ready. I don't think that should stop you from going and having a look at it. I don't think that should stop you from pocking things, but I think you'll find out when you do just the things that are actually missing today. And we are very keen on putting a bit of reality into things. We used to have an enterprise team that worked on server storage during the cloud sort of era, and so we're very used to those presentations where vendor A comes around and says it all works perfectly, and here we go. Right? That isn't there today, especially not on NFV, I would say. Things like seeing segment routing is really interesting for the WAN side, but again, it's still early days to me. Oh, and that everything must be virtual. This really causes some debates. I don't believe that at all. I have a customer who's just bought into a new physical estate on a firewall. Why would I go and offer them a solution that says, well, you can't use that anymore? I mean, that's a crazy choice, but I see some people doing it. And actually, the term I would use, perhaps rather than physical virtual versus virtual, is legacy. And Neil brought that phrase up earlier on. You guys all have legacy equipment. It may be physical. Some of it may even be virtual. if someone's putting a solution to you that says everything must be virtual, everything must work on this new platform, I'd question that. That's not how we see the world. Every one of my customers has part of a network or part of a solution they've bought into that has years left to run. I can't go offering a solution that only works in a virtual way. This one's really fascinating, and I don't have an answer to it yet in terms of specific product sets or use cases. The one I'll give you is about virtual BNG. Starting to see a lot of talk about that, but no real products yet. I spoke to 2 customers, one of which said, I'd never do virtual BNG. I don't see the reason, I'd see why I'd do it. Right, how do they do their BNG today? Centralized, lots of quas, doesn't work for them. I have another customer who went, well, actually, I could distribute that, and that would give me some benefit elsewhere. So I don't think it's a one size fits all. I don't think you should virtualize everything. I think you should look and map out, if we call them applications, what are the services you're doing and what do they fit to do? As I said on that last slide, some things I think will remain physical for many years. I mean, when we had our server business, we're still selling mainframes, right? People still have that need to do that. So one thing I heard a Gartner guy say was about mapping applications. Look at what the different technologies you're doing require, latency, jitter, scale, quas, and then map whether it can be virtual or not. Is it all marketing hype? I definitely hear that. Yeah, of course there's marketing hype, you know, I mean, it keeps me in a job. But in general, when I look at things like the ETSI standard, that was the bigger telecoms coming together, BT obviously in the room today, to put some of this together. There's definitely frustration out there from you guys in terms of some of that vendor lock-in and what you want to achieve. So yeah, I think vendors are catching up to this. You could see vendors today, for example, coming out with their own version of OpenStack. Perhaps not such a great idea, but they're catching on to it, but I don't think it's been led from a marketing point of view. So try where you can to avoid the likes of me and find the techies, right? But it is real to me, which is why I do believe in it. We're about reality, right? So the 3 things I think I would say are that whatever solution you put in, I think should be multi-vendor. And what I mean by that is that you're not tied down so much that the services you want to offer are limited because of that decision you made below. You might well take a single vendor solution at some sort of platform level, as long as it offers you the ability to offer actual services that you want on different vendors. In an NFV world, I think that makes sense. I think the second point is around that reality. Don't believe everything you see. Do go and ask for POCs. All the vendors I'm speaking to at the moment seem to be ready for POCs on most of this stuff now. And I think from the third point is the legacy versus virtual. We don't believe that people should only be doing virtual stuff. We don't believe that that's realistic. As I said, some of our old sales guys were still selling mainframes, right? So there's definitely going to be a need for physical. We are still going to be selling physical kit. You guys are still going to need it. It's about what is right to virtualize and what isn't right to virtualize. So hopefully I've done that in enough time, quick for you. You can get me on any of these. I'll jump onto IRC as well. I'm around at our stand over lunch as well. All right? Any questions? Silence. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Stuart.
Cheers, thank you.